Going to go ahead and call this March 16th, 2020 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming. Chris, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? Thank you, Craig. We'll move on to communications. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to communications from the public. This is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are not advertised for a public hearing. We do not have a public hearing this evening, so if there's anything you'd like to share with the council, now would be your opportunity. Name and address for the record, please. Any public comment tonight? Not seeing any. I'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports? Not seeing any. How about the council?
The park board has an emergency meeting tomorrow, 3:30. So. The park board has an emergency meeting tomorrow, and so that's the only thing on.
Okay, great. Anyone else? We'll move on to our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the March 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hartman. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Rebecca?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. I neglected to mention to the audience, the viewing audience, that we do have Rebecca Norton present. She's just not here, but she's here. We'll move
Hello,
on.
everybody.
Thanks, Rebecca. As I stated, we don't have any public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to item 7, which is communications from our Public Works Director, Craig Workman. We'll start with item 7A, consideration to award the bid for the State Park Road Reconstruction Phase 2 project. Craig.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'm going to do everything I can to keep these two staff reports as brief as possible. I think everybody is quite familiar with the State Park reconstruction project. We have Phase 2 yet to complete. We've done quite a bit of work in Phase 1, and now we're ready to move forward with the second phase, which goes from Haugen Heights to the railroad tracks. We did advertise for bids, which were opened on March 5th, and we did receive 2 bids for the project. The engineer's estimate on the project was $2,786,869, and the low bidder was LHC. At about $30,000 under that, $2,749,946. So based on the overall budget, this number did come in below the engineer's estimate, but it looks like we're going to be, in round numbers, about $100,000 over the $5.3 million budget. I do think there's some room to make up some of that through quantities and some value engineering that we'll do in Phase 2, but I do recommend we award the bid to LHC in the amount of $2,749,946.08.
Thank you, Craig. Is there any questions for Craig? Are there any questions for Craig on his staff report? Not seeing any, we will need a motion to award the contract for the Phase 2 of the State Park Road Reconstruction Project. Andy?
I would move to award the base bid for Phase 2 of the State Park Road Project to LHC Incorporated in the amount, sorry about that, I'll start again. I would move that we award the base bid for Phase 2 of the State Park Road Project to LHC Inc. for $2,749,946.08.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously, with Rebecca voting in the affirmative as well. Thanks, Rebecca. I've been there in your position. I know it's difficult when you're not here in person, but appreciate you being here again. We'll move on to item 7B, which is the Montana Department of Transportation Urban Funds Report, and we'll stay with Craig.
Thanks. So there were some questions raised, might be a little loud, during the recent work sessions that we had on the Baker Underpass project about also moving forward with some of the improvements on the viaduct. And although there is not money allocated in the TIF fund for this project, it was suggested that perhaps the urban funds through the Montana Department of Transportation could be an option. So I did a little bit of research at the council's request. There's quite a bit of information in this staff report. I'm just going to hit a couple of the high points, and then if you guys have questions, feel free to either ask me now or we can touch base after the meeting. Anyway, the current balance in that urban fund account is just over $1.2 million, and the city does receive $157,000 on an annual basis from MDT. Now, the issue is, in order to use funds from the urban, from MDT's urban fund, we essentially nominate a project, and then MDT administers the project. And I've outlined the process for doing that in the staff report. But it's a pretty lengthy project, and in speaking with folks from MDT, it doesn't sound like they've ever had a project nominated and constructed in the same year. And so I think it's going to be pretty difficult to try and do the improvements on top of the viaduct with the Baker underpass, which we're hoping to build this fall. You also had some questions about, now that's not to say that we can't use them, it's simply to say that I think the schedules would be not exactly aligned to be built at the same time. So the other question that came up was past projects that have been discussed where we could potentially use urban funds. There were urban funds used in 2014 and 15 for overlays on Baker Avenue, and the only other project that I could find where urban funds were discussed were the turning lanes on Wisconsin Avenue. There's a technical memo that I included with my report from the WGM group back in 2011, where they did look in quite some depth as to the 5 turning lanes that could potentially be constructed on Wisconsin Avenue at Skiles, Denver, Glenwood, Colorado, and Reservoir Road. That project was actually initiated in 2009 with the Whitefish Transportation Plan. We worked with WGM to put that report together back in 2011, and at that time the project was estimated at about $1.3 million. So realized that was roughly 10 years ago. So $1.3 million isn't going to build those 5 turning lanes today, but that's really the only other project that's been discussed. I think the $1.5 million that is available currently in the account might come close to doing that work, but excuse me, there's $1.2 million available in the account right now, so we definitely wouldn't have enough to do all 5 of those, but that could easily take care of the improvements on the viaduct if we wanted to move forward with that. So anyway, that's just a little bit of information on the urban funds. If you guys have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, or we could discuss this at another time.
Thanks, Craig. What's the direction from the council? Do we want to put some time into this evening, or do you need a little bit more time to digest the staff report, and we can have it on the next agenda?
I think, given
I'd
the
prefer
circumstance,
that.
You'd be up for that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think we really need to do the Wisconsin improvements, but the viaduct is such an important piece too. Maybe if we could get a little bit more data about what things will cost. I don't know, but
Okay, we heard you clearly. Any other opinions? Frank?
I think we ought to discuss it later.
Okay. Craig, is that all right with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any pressing questions that you'd like answered between now and when we do hear this again? Not seeing any. Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item 8A, which is consideration to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract for irrigation and landscape design services to For Restoration. And I know Greg Gunderson's in the audience. He's one of the principals at For Restoration, in case you have any questions on their proposal or project approach. With that said, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Good evening. As you all know, the Parks and Recreation Department is looking to reduce the use of treated water for irrigation and landscaping in the city's public spaces. And so we advertised for proposals from qualified firms in order to assist in that effort. Those proposals were due by February 21st of this year. We received 4 proposals for the project, and all were very impressive and clearly demonstrated each consultant's ability to complete the work. The rating panel did score all firms and invited the top 3 to interview: McKillum and Ulsimer for Restoration and WGM. The interviews were held on March 5th and March 10th, and the committee consisted of Frank Sweeney, myself, and Steve Bulmer, and Jen Sybrant, our landscape foreman, was also present during the interviews. The current estimated funds for the project are $65,000 in TIF, and those are currently identified in the TIF pro forma. And while all of the firms were clearly qualified for the job, it was the unanimous recommendation of the selection committee that we work with For Restoration for Irrigation and Landscape Design Services. Therefore, it is our recommendation that the city manager be authorized to negotiate and execute a contract with For Restoration for Irrigation and Landscape Design Services for the city's open spaces and rights of way, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Maria. Any questions for Maria on her staff report? Frank?
I just had a comment. Maria, you might explain that we're not authorizing here to spend $65,000 on it. We're authorizing to negotiate to come up with a contract that would be acceptable at a number. We don't know what that number could be, but that's what we're authorizing here. Okay, that's what we're authorizing here, or being asked to authorize here, not a specific contract for $65,000.
Okay.
That is correct.
Great. Thanks for the clarification, Frank. We'll need a motion to that effect. Who would like to make it?
Yes, I would. I would move that we authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with For Restoration for irrigation and landscape design services for the city's open spaces and rights of way.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? I'd just like to say congrats, Greg. It's great to see a local firm awarded this project. It's going to be an important one for our community. Glad to see you guys on board. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously with Rebecca voting in the affirmative. Thanks, Rebecca. And thanks, Maria. We'll move on to item 9A. You have Dana's written report enclosed with the packet. I assume there will be some questions for Dana this evening, but any questions on her specific report? Dana, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think we'll add the emergency ordinance at this point. Obviously, my staff report is outdated within minutes. In fact, the one I just handed to you has items that we have new information on. So tonight, we are proposing an emergency ordinance for the council. We've handed out a hard copy to you, and I've also included a memo. The memo does have all the specific recommendations in italicized for those who might not have a copy of it in the audience, and hopefully there is enough for everybody. But we know that we are in the midst of a public health crisis with the spread of COVID-19, and with recent positive cases in Montana and the recent governor's directive for social distancing, we have recommendations for the council to consider this evening. I'm going to go through each one. Please, if we get to the end, if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But the first one is that all city board, commission, and committee meetings are canceled through April 30th, except for the city council meeting, planning board, and the special meeting of the park board that will be held on March 17th, tomorrow. While most of our committee and board meetings do not exceed the recommended number of individuals in a gathering that's currently recommended at 50 individuals, now is the time to slow the spread of this virus and encourage social distancing for our community. Staff will continue to work on projects related to each of these committees and be prepared for the committees when they start up again. This may be extended, but this is an action that must be taken by the council. The City Council and Planning Board are unique meetings and are a challenge to cancel, primarily due to the various development projects that we have in the pipeline. Currently, if you have a CUP that is not, action is not taken on by the Planning Board or the Council within 90 days of a complete submittal, will automatically be approved. Currently, we have 3 of those that will be automatically approved if we do not hold the April 6th meeting. In the event that the Flathead City County Health Department directs or suggests a moratorium on public gatherings, or in the event of a confirmed case of COVID-19 within Flathead County, we are recommending that City Council and Planning Board meetings are canceled through April 30th. In accordance with the guidance issued by the CDC and also in Governor Bullock's directive, we will limit the number of people in our council chambers to 50 people during both planning board and city council meetings. If more than 50 individuals attend, we will open up other city hall conference rooms for the public. And we will make sure that we do a rotating manner for those to come and actually make public comment during the meeting. We are encouraging the public to provide written comments prior to these meetings, whether it is by email or dropping off a letter or mailing a letter. Any comments that are received during and up to the start of the meeting, after the packet has been issued, will be read aloud for the record so that individuals know that they are heard. We are also asking the City Council to consider closing City Hall offices to the public from March 18th through March 27th. And then to provide the city manager authorization to extend that closure on a week-by-week basis beginning March 27th. This would not mean that services would cease. All essential services at City Hall would continue to be provided to customers on a remote basis. We will have our phone lines open, we will have our emails open, and we will be working and operating in City Hall for employees 8 to 5 p.m. We have various payment options available to our customers for utility bills, which includes calling over the phone, providing payment by credit card or debit card, pay online, you can pay by mail or ACH, or by dropping off a check in our drop box right off of Baker Avenue. Other payments for building permits and resort tax payments can be made by mail or being dropped off at the Baker Avenue location, and we will check that drop box more frequently. Instead of checking it once a day, we will be checking it multiple times throughout the day. We will also set up drop boxes for building plans and other documents within the foyer of City Hall. We have a great space out there where we have the 4 main doors that enter City Hall, and then there's a foyer with two doors. We'll be able to lock those doors and provide drop box spaces where individuals can call in and let the departments know, hey, I've got to drop off these plans. I plan to be there around, say, 11 o'clock, and we'll be able to monitor that just from the front desk staff. We are also recommending that the City Council temporarily waive late fees and shutoffs for delinquent water and sewer accounts through April 30th, and to also temporarily waive resort tax delinquent fees. Some individuals and businesses in our community may struggle during this time due to accommodating school closures, having to endure unpaid leave, or needing to alter or close business operations. And together, I think we can make it through this, no problem. But taking one step to help alleviate the financial burden for those or stress of not being able to have water during these next 30 days, I think is very important. I'm also proposing that the city approve an emergency leave up to an equivalent of 2 weeks paid leave for City Hall or for all city employees who are required to be quarantined by the Flathead City County Health Department or a licensed physician due to COVID-19. Employees who are normally scheduled 40 hours a week will receive up to 80 hours of paid emergency leave. This will not be a leave that is accrued, and nor would it be payable upon termination, but it aligns directly with the bill that is actually at Congress right now that may require additional paid leave. We will, in this situation, I think it's very important when we think about our city employees that we are requesting that or requiring them to remain home when they're ill, whether it's COVID-19 or if it's a simple flu, as we know that is going around. We want them to not have to make the decision to break quarantine while they're, or come to work, or find other means to be financially stable during this time. If the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is passed, and there are additional benefits that are required, we will automatically apply those to the emergency leave. The impact to the budget, while one may think is substantial, and it could be if we were to pay out 10 days for an average employee, or 80 hours for the average employee, that would be a very costly experience. However, because we do not anticipate all city employees to need this benefit, and the only other option was for them to use their other accrued leave or go unpaid, the cost to the city is actually a quarter of the amount that we would pay out, because for sick leave, we only pay out 25%. So the idea here is that they would be able to use this emergency leave. They may instead not use accrued sick leave, and then we would be paying out a quarter of that sick leave. That total cost for the city could be up to like $98,000 roughly, but we do not pay that out until they are terminated. We also do not have employees leave all at the same time. So to say that you would see a budget impact in any one given year, I really don't think I could even identify it for you. So it's a minor budgetary impact, in my opinion, but one that would help our employees feel secure that they have leave when needed to be quarantined. Unfortunately, our most vulnerable population of our employees are those that have had to use sick leave for whether it's surgeries or have had other types of health issues that's required extensive medical care and leave from work. They're the ones that don't have a lot of leave left. Even somebody who's on maternity leave may have used all of their leave. So again, I'm just encouraging that we consider our employees in this. So those are the main points that are included in the emergency ordinance. And I still would like to, before we move forward with that, give you an update of other items that we're doing that we've been able to implement without council direction based on them being operational in nature. First, effective today, employees were notified that all travel to conferences and/or meetings in Montana and out of state is canceled for employees through April 17th. We are working with employees who are traveling for personal reasons to ensure that if they have been to a location that is seeing community-wide spread, that we will determine on a case-by-case basis whether they need to self-quarantine or not before coming back to work. We've updated our telecommuting policy to ensure that we have the process ready to go for those that want to request remote work. And for those positions that are conducive to working remotely, we are allowing arrangements when child care issues have come up due to school closures. Now, our IT offices, our office is working diligently to ensure that all remote work is done safe, because we do not want to put our city's network and data at risk. So we have been procuring certain equipment necessary to accommodate those individuals that are going to require remote work, but it is not a significant cost at this point. All school-related programs, such as after school and before school, are following the closures of the school district, and we will process refunds due to the extenuating circumstances of this public health issue for those that have prepaid. We're also having no meter changeouts or fixture counts that require staff to enter homes, and that is through April 17th. This will primarily impact our remodels, and this could be extended, but again, it's important to keep our employees safe when you're entering homes. City staff is also encouraged to limit meetings in large groups and utilize our larger conference rooms to ensure social distancing. And all emergency responders are ready to continue to provide 24/7 coverage. We have our mutual aid available to us, and the police department is also working on a mutual aid response plan with other local jurisdictions. And we are also, they're all being outfitted with the appropriate masks, gloves, etc. We have implemented all of the best practices at City Hall offices for disinfecting, cleaning objects that are frequently touched, providing hand sanitizer, which is hard to come by now, so we might run out. But washing hands with soap and water is actually more effective, so we do have that still available to all of our employees. Tonight, there are wipes at the council or at the podium for those that want to wipe the microphones, and we also intend to provide hand sanitizer for these meetings, if possible. All employees have been instructed to stay home if they're feeling sick, and we have confirmed that our normal treatment of water and wastewater effectively kills the virus. That's very important for those that have concerns about the availability of water. And all departments have plans ready to continue operations during potential staffing shortages, but also to continue providing essential services if necessary closures do occur. A review of special events has showed that we only had one special event that was approved, and the park board will be discussing this tomorrow evening since it only involves the use of a park and it does not involve other facilities. The library did close today and is closing for 2 weeks, and the court will remain open to process cases, but will also promote best practices and operate remotely if necessary. Interesting information that Angie and I were just noticing is that Yellowstone, Missoula, Butte, Silver Bow, Gallatin, and Lewis and Clark County Health Departments have all required closing of bars, restaurants, gyms, casinos, breweries, and wineries, effective today through the 24th of March. So that is a health department, a county health department action that's been taken. It will be interesting to see what steps our health department takes, the Flathead City County Health Department. But again, we're all hoping that by taking these steps, while uncomfortable in the short term, will help us not eliminate the virus, but to slow the spread so our healthcare facilities can manage the demand of our most vulnerable populations who will likely experience the more intense symptoms and complications. So with that said, Angie, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. And mine's more from the perspective of holding public meetings. Part of the reason that we suggested that the city continue to hold planning board and city council meetings it is not only because of the important decisions that you guys make and the leadership you provide, but again, as Dana mentioned, there are some applications that automatically are granted if not acted on in a certain amount of time by the city council. One rather creative solution, I think Dave came up with it, was to instigate an emergency zoning, interim zoning ordinance, which would remove the 90-day requirement from the CUP. There's also a 60-day, I believe, requirement in the Lakeshore Protection. I'd suggest that that maybe be removed too. We are under state law required to act on subdivision applications within a certain amount of time. I don't think we can get around that. One idea to consider is placing a moratorium, a brief moratorium, hopefully, on just the accepting subdivision applications. And the reason I say that is if we were to completely call off planning board and city council meetings, there is a public process that should be followed with respect to those kinds of applications. If we can't follow the process, then I do think that affects the general welfare of the city. So it is something to consider. If you were inclined to do that, it would be a 7-day notice period. You guys would have to call a special session probably, and then act on it. It, of course, would have no bearing on the 3 CUP applications that are pending in front of planning board on Thursday, because we just wouldn't have time because of state requirements to get the ordinance in effect. But it might be prudent going forward.
Steve?
Yeah, I have a question about, it's related to that. In item number 2, this is not directly related to what you just, to your statement, Angie, but in item number 2, in the event a confirmed case of COVID-19 within Flathead, we're just canceling planning board, and city council, and then what happens? Those applications just automatically get approved with no public process. Is that what happens?
If the city doesn't act on a CUP application within the allotted amount of time, they're deemed approved. Yes. And, you know, we kind of suggested the language about an confirmed case of COVID. Again, that's up to council if you want to strike that and just abide by city county health departments' directives or suggestions.
Okay.
It seems to me that most of the, the counties that are actively, and the health department shutting down bars, restaurants, and breweries, most of them have actually had a confirmed case.
And there's nothing under a state of emergency declared by the governor or by the president that allows us to not abide by these rather short timelines for.
Unfortunately, the CUP, that's in our code. CUPs aren't dictated by state law. So that made its way into our code. I think we can change that, at least, there's no time limitation for council to act on PUDs. I think, an emergency interim ordinance, changing that requirement until we're over this would be prudent. State law dictates the time frame for subdivisions. I don't know that we can get around state law. We could possibly just place a moratorium on subdivision applications for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, and that was my other question about other applications, because it looks like we're closing city offices on Thursday. Is that correct?
It's Wednesday. But
Wednesday.
we would still be operating, and so plans can be dropped off, and staff will still review all plans. They can
Okay.
still submit for building permits.
And your thought about that is that the impact to the city would be too great if we just say we're not accepting applications until a date further in the future. I mean, the governor has shut down schools until the 27th, plus potentially. And I'm just trying to think of what is the safest thing for us to do.
Right.
Because even if, somebody drops off plans and potentially they're sick,
There's
the planning board, the planning staff could get sick from that.
And we'll be having that risk with any payments that are made to by paper. But what they're finding, I think, with this virus, is that, we'll be, as I touch my face, as everybody says that too. I'm not learning that skill very well. But, identifying for staff, do not touch your face, process payments, wash your hands afterwards, those general steps. The risk that what we're trying to avoid is somebody coming in who's sick and sneezing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's most likely transmitted, is that close contact with somebody, and they're sneezing when they're doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. What I'm trying to do is limit the impacts on our community and developers. Right now, they are ramping up for building season this summer. Now, the financial market might change their tune in the next few months, but a lot of these people have been in the works. So to still accommodate those developers, we were intending to still operate just without the face-to-face contact.
Okay.
I have a question.
I have a couple other questions if I can continue. The next one is, this one's kind of mundane, but have you considered reconfiguring City Hall to move seats a little farther apart so when people are in here that we're not encouraging them to sit close to each other?
So at future meetings, council meetings and planning board, assuming that, those are continued as possible, we could pull out, every other chair in here. I think that's at least a good indication, since we know the occupancy of this building is more than what we will be allowing. Department directors, unless necessary, will not be attending meetings, and I think what we're going to do is keep our council meetings to planning board items, or those that have a significant timeline related to, say, our TIF sunsets or contracts that need to be approved. So, with council's approval, in the past, you've all wanted all of us here, but I would like to have that opportunity to relieve directors from attending, because we really don't have much space over here. Council, I think we can spread you out, maybe use the other mics that we haven't used before, if possible, to have that space for all of you as well.
And then my last question is about the emergency leave for employees. The way I understood that was that if they are mandated quarantine by the health department or a doctor, and I just don't know the answer to this question. If someone in their family is sick, does the whole family get quarantined? Because that seems like.
If a family member is quarantined, likely those living in that building will also be quarantined. Or if they come into contact, the city county health department would likely quarantine.
Okay.
So,
I just want to make sure that it gets, that employees have access to that for
Right.
those kind of things.
Yes, so, and that's, and again, that's where we're going to, the doctors and the city county health department, they are our health department. So when they tell us that an individual needs to be quarantined, whether it's because they came from another country or they, are suspected of having it or have been around somebody who's had it or caring for a family member that has it, that would still apply, yes.
Okay, all right.
It's just not for school closures, and that's what we're trying to make it very clear, that this leave is specifically to keep a potentially sick individual at home, but not just because you don't have childcare. They can use all of their leave for those situations, including sick leave. That's a new policy that came out since the school closed because of an illness. We're allowing individuals to use their sick leave if they cannot be at work.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Dana? I had a few questions, but
And I assume we're probably okay, but because we're doing this by ordinance, obviously, we won't have a second reading for 10 days, and which means it won't really take effect until our April 6th meeting, when we get back to meet and pass it on to second reading. So I'm assuming that we can go ahead and institute all of the things in here prior to that, rather than
So the nice thing
having
about
to wait for 2 weeks?
yeah,
goes into effect immediately.
it's an emergency ordinance, so it can go into effect immediately.
Okay.
There is no second reading, so it will all be effective this evening.
Assume that, but then I was wondering, do we need to actually state that at the top of the ordinance, that it is an emergency?
It's in section 10.
Because it says it, because we
Yeah.
should say it's an emergency, so we can do it right away, okay.
Yeah, section 10 at the bottom, it states that, and then at the top it
Okay.
does say we waive the second reading, so.
That's good. Just then, I guess another comment, I mean, I don't suspect we would fall prey to this, but I certainly would entertain a moratorium on taking any subdivision applications until we know exactly where we're at. I don't think the public is that devious out there, and someone would come in and drop it on our door, and we'd have to get it approved, but you never know. I mean, it's something that could possibly happen. In the event that we did get shut down for a longer period of time, I don't think the public would be very well served by that, so I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but I would certainly, I would entertain that.
as well.
Frank, Steve, Melissa?
Yeah.
Ryan? Along those same lines, Angie, you mentioned that implementing an interim emergency zoning ordinance would require 7-day noticing, yet we have CUP applications, hypothetically, if the planning board meeting's held on Thursday, which I hope it is, we do have a conditional use permit that they will be reviewing. If the council elects to take your suggestion and implement an interim zoning ordinance, and that public hearing occurs on Thursday, and there's a recommendation up or down to the council at our next meeting, can we still implement that interim emergency ordinance and capture that project or projects? I assume there's more than, well, I know there's one going Thursday, but I know that you have 3 in the hopper.
There's 3. One is rather large, the other 2 are not. I do not think we would capture those, given how the timing of when the emergency ordinance would go into effect.
Pretty sure of that? Yeah, Dave's shaking his head, nodding, excuse me.
I don't know that we would capture the ones that are already scheduled for planning board, because it won't, that ordinance won't go in effect until after that planning board meeting.
Okay,
I think we would probably capture the ones that have for next planning board.
and there are a few.
Yes.
So I would further Andy's suggestion and have the council consider an interim, zoning ordinance, emergency zoning ordinance, so that we do capture those other CUPs coming forward. General agreement? Rebecca?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm just wondering if there's some techie solution where people could call in with questions instead of showing up in person. Because
So-
a lot of people watch the city council meeting on television.
So Rebecca,
Right.
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
We've looked into that, and it does have its challenges. We do not have the technology available right now, because to have somebody call in, be recorded for our live streaming, would have to be connected into our system, or have a phone that is using our microphone system here. When you have people call into a number, it's very easy to mute it when you have one presenter, but when you have to open it up to public comment, you're going to have a lot of people speaking over them, over each other. So you'd have to have some type of program where they register and get a PIN, maybe register for public comment in advance. It has a lot of challenges and the software necessary to do that. I don't know how quickly we can implement that. That's why we're encouraging people to submit comment beforehand, and if they want to send an email up into the start of the meeting, staff will read them aloud to let individuals know that, you know, it is being recorded. So that will be heard through the live streaming. But at this time, the system capabilities are not possible. And as you can tell, we have challenges just with having you call in, Rebecca.
And I guess I'd add to that,
Yes, that's
you know,
But
there
I can
was.
hear you, so that's good. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I guess I'd add to that, you know, I think cities across the state are struggling, especially in the wake of the governor's closing of the schools, and city attorneys were going back and forth on email all day today about this entire issue. You know, it's an issue, and it says, what is an open meeting? Does that mean you watch it on TV? Does that mean you hear it? Does that mean you get to be physically present at the meeting? I see challenges not allowing, you know, an actual live meeting, and I think Great Falls has kind of taken the same stance. Some of the smaller cities are trying to remote, but again, Dana's right, there just really isn't the technology. So I know at least two groups in Montana have taken, nonprofits have taken a very firm stance that open meeting means open meeting. It doesn't mean, you know, participating by phone or remotely. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve?
I just want to ask
And
about
Melissa?
number 2. What are people's thoughts about striking the second part of that, or in the event of a confirmed case within Flathead County, canceling all city council and planning board meetings instead of just following the directives of the city county health department?
Clarify that, did you,
Well-
so are you saying we should go ahead and initiate that?
Well, whether we want to strike that second part, because it sounds like that's an addition by Dana, or if we just follow what the Flathead City County Health Department directive is. So if they say we should close all meetings, then we close all meetings, or we cancel all meetings. Otherwise, Dana is saying that, or if we get a confirmed case in Flathead County, that triggers us to cancel our meetings, rather than waiting for the health department to do that. Does that
I
make
guess
sense?
if I understand what you're saying correctly, I would feel more comfortable taking the initiative if we do have a confirmed case, going ahead and proceeding with that. I'd rather have an abundance of caution in this situation as opposed to waiting on our county health department.
I agree.
Okay.
Ryan?
Dana, do we have any information from the city county health department about this moratorium on public gatherings? I mean, tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you know, they're just providing guidance from the CDC and following those similar directives. So without any confirmed cases here, you know, it's up to each organizer's ability to make the determination to cancel those meetings. In Whitefish, like I said, we reviewed all of our special events, and the one that we do have is at the Ice Den. So the park board will be discussing that tomorrow. And we've looked all the way through April on those. So May, we do have some more coming up. So if this extends, we'll be reaching out to those event organizers. But at this point, I have not heard from our county health department that they're going to be doing anything. And Joe, have you heard any updates at all about that? No, so.
We're meeting tomorrow.
They'll meet tomorrow. So.
Melissa?
Just a couple more things. So on the ordinance that we have, it talks about this Center for Disease Control and Prevention issuing interim guidance for recommending the cancellation of events or gatherings that consist of 50 or more people. But if I understand correctly, today there was talk about limiting those to 10 people. So should we just change do we need an amendment to change that wording, or is that necessary?
So if it's limited to 10 people, we probably can't have meetings because you have 6 counselors, the mayor, and then if you even have Angie, myself, and Michelle just here, we're at 10. So public becomes an issue. Having public comment come in, we could have them in the other conference room. I haven't seen that official guidance come out yet. They might have been discussing it, but I have not seen that
And
yet.
I wasn't sure whether it was, how official it was, or whether they're just encouraging that, or so. But just because if it has changed, then do we strike that from the ordinance if it's no longer factual? Just strike that line? Is it necessary to?
If this changes.
It seems like we need another catch-all. I mean, this thing is evolving so fast that
Right.
we need something that says, we need another whereas that says, in the event the CDC further, or the federal government further restricts gatherings or whatever. I mean, we could end up like Italy, where people have to stay in their homes, and we don't want to have to revise this ordinance again on the fly if we're not allowed to meet and those kind of things. So it seems to me like we need something that captures the eventuality of things getting more restrictive.
That was going to be one of my comments, if I can just chime in here, and this is probably a question for Angie and Dana, but assuming this goes into effect this evening, it requires 2/3 vote of the council, it's in effect for 90 days. I would personally like to, it's probably a question for Angie, provide Dana the administrative authority to amend or modify certain sections of this ordinance without have to come back to council for approval, and I'm specifically referencing sections, so I'm on page 2 now of the ordinance, section 3 relating to the city council and planning board meetings being canceled through April 30th, 2020. Section 4, which gets to your point, Steve, about limiting the occupancy to 50 people during planning board and city council meetings. Section 5 regarding city hall offices being closed to the public through March 27th. And then finally, section 6 related to waivers of fees and shutoffs for delinquent water and sewer accounts. I personally would like to see us give Dana the discretion and the authority to make or extend or modify those conditions of this ordinance without having to come back to this body. I think financial decisions such as section 7 regarding additional sick leave accrual or for employees, I think that's something that probably should come back to us, but those sections 3 through 6, I think we need to provide her that authority. And I'll just throw that out there for a suggestion and then kick it to probably Angie to see if we can do that legally.
I would like to see that. I think that's an appropriate way to deal with it.
Absolutely.
I agree.
John, would you be okay if we add number 2 also, in that's canceling all other committee meetings?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
We already have that authorization in section 5 with the city hall closures, just because that was a no-brainer for me on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we have those changes made?
Yes, I think you can have those changes made.
Okay.
And Joe actually just showed me a release that it is, the CDC is now, it is now 10 people. So,
What's the duration on that?
the duration
Just
on that?
next few weeks?
Duration?
Didn't say.
Okay.
So with that said, are we going to modify 50 down to 10? Okay.
That's the
Then to
case, then
Dana's
we have to-
point, what does that do for our ability to hold public meetings?
So I think we can utilize, I think for now, again, because we're talking about the issues with the CUPs automatically approving. 2 are accessory dwelling units, 1 is a large project. We've only received one public comment on the one large project. You know, so those are the ones that could be at issue. So if we hold our April 6th council meeting, again, encourage public participation prior with public comments. Utilize these rooms. We could maybe schedule timing for individuals to, I don't know, because then they can't watch the entire meeting. That doesn't work. We can use the conference room, up to 10 people in there, I guess, and the TV outside. So we could still utilize it. We would have to minimize the number of people that would come into this room.
We could use the TVs out there.
But that is difficult to control.
Is there a way to only allow public written testimony through email or mailed in? And have that be read as part of the?
I think we can encourage it. I don't think we can require it. To be honest, I don't think that a whole lot of people will want to be attending meetings at this point. I think it may kind of self-limit itself, if that makes sense. You know, and maybe we phrase it, yeah, well, I mean, if it's 10 people, if that's recommended, I guess maybe we will say we will make every effort to hold occupancy to 10.
Because at any one time with directors and city council here will be,
Yeah.
even if it was just Michelle and myself and Angie or Dave, we're already at 10.
What is our liability if, worst case scenario, 11 people are here, one person gets sick from being here?
I think
What's the city liability on that?
well, I mean, would we have liability? You, to a certain extent, yeah, you can never get rid of liability, but that person's choosing to attend a council meeting knowing that they might be exposing themselves. Also, how can you pinpoint exposure, right? I think it would be very hard to establish. Well, I came to a city council meeting and that is where I got COVID. I think that would be hard. So, I mean, we can't completely mitigate the risk, the legal risk. I think the bigger issue is, you know, the health risk. So,
Definitely.
To your point, and I'm not stating any one director is less important in terms of being present at these meetings than anyone else, but if we're running up against a 10-person limit, we could always rotate out one of the city councilors and they can remain absent from the meeting to free up at least one space for our planning director or planning staff to attend, since these are planning-related conditional use permits.
and given that, you know, our charter allows city council members to call in, I mean, that's.
Yep, great point. Yep. So, I think
And
we have
there's-
to do it, and I have full confidence that we'll figure it out. It might be clunky and cumbersome, but it's what we have to do. It's the bottom line.
Just one more item, kind of related, but I don't know if this has been discussed or if it's even relevant or workable here, but I just had heard about certain agencies where they are just kind of setting up two teams, so you kind of swap out just to, again, limit, you know, the number of people in a building at any given time or office space or so. I just am throwing that out there.
Yeah, you know, we haven't really discussed that significantly, but, you know, in walking through City Hall, most offices provide that 6 feet space. We have only one, maybe two that are close to that 6-foot distance. So that's, you know, what we're encouraging with our employees to do a conference call, use Microsoft Teams, set up go-to meetings between yourselves here at City Hall. So yeah, we haven't done the two-team part. Part of that's difficult because you're going to ask people to use paid leave while they're off the clock. And so we are trying to also, you know, consider that as well.
Further comments or questions?
I mean,
Andy?
I guess what I would say on the number of people, because the 10 today was not a mandate, it was just a suggestion. So I would just suggest that we leave it as, and could restate that simply, you know, occupation is limited to the current 50 people as directed by the CDC, or whatever number as dictated at a later date by state, county, or federal officials. Rather than putting an actual number in there. I mean, they may come up with 5, they may come up with 3, I mean, they may go to 25. But the 10 was just, that was not of the CDC saying for sure, as I read it today.
I thought you confirmed that it was CDC saying 10.
CDC's recommendation.
Was that their actual recommendation today?
Yes.
Okay.
Or just eliminate the number and say
Just eliminate the
whatever
number, just go with
recommendation is.
CDC, yeah, just take the number out of there.
Whatever the CDC recommendation is on gatherings.
So that would be, yeah, because it is a recommendation. Would that be as recommended by the CDC or otherwise dictated by county health, federal or state law?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it.
Great. Further comments, questions? Frank?
John, the only thing that causes me concern here, and I'd like, this may be something we have to work on in short order, given what we're dealing with here, but it seems to me that, particularly with at least one or several of these projects that are going to be coming through the planning board, that we obviously can't stop even with an emergency ordinance or emergency zoning, that we somehow figure out that if we have to cancel our meeting because of some reason before we can make a decision on that, I'd like to see if there's some way we can figure out how to do it remotely and get that approved, because I don't want, I think it would be a disservice to this community to allow any of these projects to go forward simply because we couldn't meet. I mean, that's just wrong on every level I can think of. And so I really want us to, I want to stress that if we are in a position where we can't physically meet, that Chris, you and figure out how we can do this in some form or fashion on a remote basis. We just have to, I just think we have to be able to manage those particular projects.
I agree.
I should also mention real quickly that planning staff did reach out to all 3 applicants and asked if they would be willing to waive a 90-day requirement, which they can do. I think we heard from one that she wasn't, they were not willing to because they had a contractor ready to go. I think we heard from another one that, thought it was a good idea. It was very complimentary of the city of considering it, but we didn't know whether that actually meant that it was waived or not. And the remaining one, it was a positive initial response, but the person that gave us a positive initial response isn't really the decision maker and said they'd have to bring it back to the owner.
Further comments or questions? I think it's implied, Frank, it's a good point that I think staff and IT, and I know Chris and Jake have met, are going to work on some remote, access arrangement to your point. So appreciate that. Thanks, Chris.
And just so you guys are aware, that might come with a budgetary impact. Those softwares are not cheap to do, to have the opportunity for public to call in. So we'll look at the numbers, but again, by doing so and still holding a meeting on those topics, you're not having people walk in here. That can be a problem. Again, like we said, most governments are saying you have to be open. The meeting has to be open. So while we can try our best to make that it's remote, financially, our budget's tight, and I can tell you that we are likely headed into some type of temporary recession. So I just want to be cautious, too, of what we're spending for something that might be utilized in an interim basis.
Sure.
So, one thing that you might consider is in Section 3, maybe that cancellation automatically occurs after April 6th, your next scheduled council meeting, so that you have that opportunity that, if they make a moratorium afterwards, it automatically approves, but if not, we could hold a special council meeting session prior to that.
You guys fine with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir.
And then in terms of circling back on the moratorium for accepting subdivision applications, and then secondly, the interim emergency zoning ordinance waiving the 90-day review process, how are we going to handle that? When are we going to see it?
So it would be at your next council meeting.
It'll be at the
for
next meeting,
moratorium.
okay.
And the zoning change.
Okay, I thought you had mentioned that we'd have to call a special meeting for some reason.
I was just saying if you wanted to do it before your next council meeting.
Before.
Okay, but it's not going to, again, capture those current applications.
It will not.
So I don't see there's a need to hold a special meeting.
Okay.
Personally.
I think unless we hear that moratorium on meetings is coming forward, then we might be able to move, you might want to move and have a special meeting. And so
Okay.
I'll communicate with you guys if that happens.
Great.
Yeah.
So have we provided clear and adequate direction for you to make these edits tonight? Or maybe not tonight, but before this goes into effect, which is going to be tonight.
Yes. Yes, within, the next, few minutes. Yeah, no, we will make those edits.
Okay.
I think it's clear.
Great. Anything further from staff or council on this item? Angie.
I just mentioned one thing because Maria reminded me. There is part of this ordinance, it's section 8, regarding the public restrooms and the parking structure in the O'Shaughnessy Center. Maybe Maria wants to speak a little bit towards that section.
Sure. In research with looking at other parks and recreation departments throughout the country, there are many communities that are also closing public restrooms as they pose a risk of spreading the virus as well. And although the Parks Department does have many public restrooms within their parks, the O'Shaughnessy Center and the parking structure restrooms are not within the Park Board's jurisdiction. And so that's why that would be considered under the council. The Park Board will be taking that into consideration during their special meeting tomorrow for the other restrooms within the parks.
And I assume we'll also add that to Dana's administrative list, that she can amend those dates accordingly as well. Okay, great. Thanks, Maria. Further comments or questions of staff? If not, we will need a motion. This will require 2/3 majority of the councilors present. Rebecca is here as a reminder. Rebecca, do you have anything further to add before we vote on what will be ordinance 20-04?
No, I just really appreciate Dana and Angie working so hard to get this done quickly.
Agreed. Thanks, Rebecca. We'll need a motion to that effect.
I'll move to approve ordinance number 20-4. An emergency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana, enacting measures to reduce the spread of the 2019 novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and waiving a second reading.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Steve. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Rebecca?
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. Michelle? Thanks very much, Dana and Angie. Appreciate it. Dana, anything else to report on?
Well, I guess one more just item is that we are working with our crisis communications team, and some of them are here. So we are planning to have letters prepared for our citizens and businesses and the mayor to also sign on tomorrow, so that we have all this information that will be released to everyone, to inform them properly. So that would be it on that.
Great, thanks, Dana. We'll move on to item 9C. We'll stay with Dana. Authorization of certain employees to contract for services with the State of Montana State Information Technology Services Division.
Thank you. Good evening again. I'm tired, obviously. Need a nap. My staff report is in the packet on page 193. What we are looking at doing is the State of Montana Information Technology Services Division provides certain services for local governments in Montana. And to contract with them and procure services, they do need a list of employees that are approved to contract for those services. We have a few different items that we're intending to work with them on. One of that is internet services through SummitNet. It provides a higher degree of protection as it goes through both the state's Palo Alto firewall and before it reaches ours. There is a considerable cost savings as we look at increasing our bandwidth over our local and national vendors. The planning department is also looking at utilizing the state's file transfer system for secure receipt of building plans as we move to electronic acceptance of those plans. And then we also are considering using their data center for offsite storage. The costs of those are comparable or lower than our national vendors. So there's no financial requirement at this time. Any future procurement of services will be determined on a case-by-case basis and within the budget as approved by council. And if additional budget authority is required, we would discuss that with the council ahead of time. So staff respectfully recommends that the city council approve for the mayor's signature the letter authorizing certain employees to procure services from the State Information Technology Service Division of the state of Montana. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions for Dana? We'll just need a motion to that effect. Ryan?
I would move to approve the letter authorizing certain employees to procure services from the State Information Technology Services Division of the state of Montana.
Thanks, Ryan. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign. Rebecca?
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. Michelle? Thanks, Dana. We'll move on to item 10A. Since we did not hold our work session, we'll skip item 10A until we interview those candidates at a future meeting. And we need to consider approving the tentative FY21 budget calendar, which is located on page 196 of your packet. Dana, did you want to go through that briefly, or?
I could. So especially since we have two new counselors with us here today. Of course, I had it up and then I put it away. It follows the similar calendars as in the past. Our department directors are working on their budgets to provide to the finance director and city manager. Those will be for us on March 23rd. In April, we do have the court's deadline for the judge to submit a request for his compensation. That is by ordinance. April 3rd, the finance director will submit a draft of the newly compiled 5-year capital improvement plan to the city manager. That would be me submitting it to myself. So a little bit different since we're operating without our finance director until April 3rd. But overall, what we'll be doing with the capital improvements plan this year, different from other years maybe, is we'll be providing that at the same time as we do the preliminary budget. And that will be to the city council on May 4th, which is the first Monday in May. We do not take any action that evening. It's just informative so that we provide a copy to you. May 26th and June 8th are very important dates. Those are dates that we have tentatively scheduled for our budget meetings with department directors. We hold those in the evening and in a work session format so that the directors can present their budgets to the council. June 15th is a preliminary public hearing, and that is where the city council adopts the preliminary budget. That allows us to move forward with spending after June 30th. July 1st is our beginning of our fiscal year, and then August 3rd is when we will actually get the taxable value numbers from the state. That allows us to wrap up the budget, and we will have notice of the public hearing August 5th and 12th in the pilot, and then the public hearing will for the final budget will be August 17th. So all very important dates. This is what allows us to spend funds, and we will see how we are impacted by coronavirus, and if amendments to this plan has to occur, we will do so. But tentatively, I think the important dates for you all to consider would be the tentative budget meeting dates to see if those work for your schedules.
Okay. How do the dates look for everyone?
Looks good.
I do have a question because it's tied into our budget adoption and, more importantly, your meetings with the directors. Dana, we typically have held our council retreat in advance of those meetings in order for the council to have the opportunity to provide you with direction that then's filtered down to the directors before we actually adopt the formal goals for both staff and council. Obviously, I think a retreat's out of the question at this point. I'm looking for ideas. The one idea I did have was for Dana to email out to the council our adopted goals for this fiscal year, and if you see anything missing or that you would like added to that list, that you submit those directly to Dana, and perhaps, Dana, if you had time to compile the comments you do receive from the council, and perhaps a short staff report that you could update us with, and then when it comes time to meet with you for budget preparation, we can discuss those goals at that time.
Sure, that works. I was intending to have department directors work with me so that in April we can provide you with our proposed 2021 goals.
Okay.
And in the meantime, though, I can provide you with our current goals. But the nice thing about having directors look at what they're planning for FY21 is sometimes workloads can be an issue, but they might also have projects that you guys aren't aware of. So we want you to know what we have coming forward. So at this point, we'll plan to have those out to you mid-April.
And those will include the director's goals for FY21?
Correct. Yep.
Updated? Okay.
Correct, yes.
Great. And maybe if you don't mind, obviously there's quite a few goals that we accomplished that are on the current list. If you don't mind just noting what have and have not been accomplished. And I know you've included that in your quarterly reports, but that would be helpful as well.
Absolutely. Yep, and it'll be time for the quarterly update anyway, so March 30th is our end date. So department directors generally give me their updates, 15 days roughly after that. We're trying to get those out quicker. So we'll definitely be able to at least identify those that are accomplished
Okay.
or will be accomplished by June 30th.
Great.
So,
Does that seem like a reasonable approach given the situation? Okay.
And on that note, also with the retreat, sometimes we've also met budget planning meetings also on more of a limited basis, but I will send out just an update of the concerns I have for the upcoming budget and positives for you guys to review. If you have any questions, you can respond directly to me, but I will just give you a synopsis of where I think we're going to be going with this year's budget too.
Okay.
In advance.
That would be great. With that said, we will need a motion approving the tentative FY21 budget schedule.
I will move to approve the tentative FY21 budget calendar.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hartman. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Rebecca?
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. We'll start this evening with Frank. Anything to add, comments?
No, I really don't. I just, I know the public, to the extent they're listening or caring. I think if we pay attention to these guidelines, this is going to be over sooner than later, but Joe knows better than I, but it just seems to me that if we'll do this, if we pay attention, we're going to be fine.
Thanks, Frank. Steve?
Yeah, I just want to encourage everyone to do what you're asked to do in this time, and that's about it. And hopefully we'll see what happens with the planning board meeting. I think maybe we should determine the planning board meeting this Thursday based on the most recent 10-person thing. Still a little unclear on that, actually, now that I think of it.
What we can do is we'll make sure that, we'll have the planning board and certain employees. We'll open that side room so that there's adequate space for individuals to participate without being in close contact. 10-person gathering in rooms this size is substantial versus 10 people in a small home or within a restaurant. So I feel that our space here is adequate to continue, at least with the planning board on Thursday.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Melissa?
I actually have a request of the council. I'm hoping that we can consider, as a council, passing a resolution in support of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is some legislation proposed in Congress, and it's a bipartisan piece of legislation. It's being supported by Citizens Climate Lobby. We have Robin as one of their members out in the audience today. And I have some reading material, so you can look through it and see what you think. There are a number of cities across the country that are passing resolutions, and there's a website address here where you can go and look at all the different cities across the country that are supporting. I just touched on a few: Jackson, Mississippi; Asheville, North Carolina; Anchorage, Alaska; Cincinnati, Ohio; Palm Beach County, Florida; Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So, and the list goes on and on. It's quite extensive. And it really is the piece of legislation with the most support, certainly the most bipartisan support in Congress. So I'll just pass it out and people can look through it.
I met with Melissa on this item, and I just suggested that she provide the council this information, and if she'd like, I'm all in favor for this to be on a future agenda under councilor comments, which will give you the opportunity to review this, digest it, and then we can get into a discussion. And then by a showing of hands, if we have a majority of the council that supports bringing this forward via a resolution at a future meeting, we can have that discussion at that time as well. And I would just caveat this, Melissa, just given the circumstances, and we've got higher priorities at this point, not to diminish this priority, but I'll leave it to staff's discretion whether or not we have time for this right now, given we're trying to keep these meetings concise and quick.
No, I wholeheartedly agree, and I realize that this might be delayed more than I would have hoped, but I appreciate people just taking the time to review it and that we can consider it. Yeah. And similar to the crisis we're facing right now with this pandemic, we could very well be facing a climate crisis with similar threats to our way of life. So I feel that this is certainly a very important issue, and I hope we'll be able to consider as soon as we're able.
Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Appreciate it. I know you put a lot of work into this. Thanks, Melissa. Ryan?
Yeah, two things. I would echo what Frank said. I think if we follow the guidelines, hopefully this thing will be over sooner rather than later. The Washington Post did a great article a couple days ago about the importance of social distancing and why it's put in place and how it specifically prevents viruses like this from spreading exponentially. So I would recommend everyone take a look at that. Also, there's a great website called CIDRAP, which is the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. They're out of the University of Minnesota. Their director has a lot of good information as well. So I would just encourage people to try to stay informed and do what they can.
Thanks, Ryan. That website again?
It's CIDRAP, C-I-D-R-A-P.
C-I-D-R-A-P, okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. Andy?
Dana, thank you. Great job on short notice, and that's why you're our manager. Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with everybody. Obviously, everything that comes down, we need to really pay attention to that. Wash your hands, sterilize, sanitize, but don't forget to moisturize too, because if you're like me, your hands get really, really dry. I guess from a city standpoint, I think that city staff will handle it really well. I do have some concerns for our emergency services, because it's not like we have a very deep bench there that we can call on in the event that we do have some problems, and we do get an infection in either of those departments, the police department or the fire department. So I would really encourage you guys to do everything you can to keep everybody as healthy as possible, because I think we are vulnerable there. I think that is our one problem, and they're the people we may need the most. So anyway, so you guys really wash your hands and sterilize and sanitize. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I have one item. Rebecca asked me to read into the record and share this with the public, but it's a letter from the North Valley Food Bank Executive Director Jesse Lee regarding North Valley Food Bank's COVID-19 emergency response plan. So I'll go ahead and read this into the record. On behalf of Rebecca, thanks for bringing this to us, Rebecca. The following memo is a brief overview of North Valley Food Bank's initial emergency response to COVID-19. Please note that this is a highly evolving situation and that we are working diligently to respond to any changes that occur in our community. North Valley Food Bank will continue to operate at its normal capacity at this time. We will continue weekly distributions. This includes distributions on Wednesdays from 3 to 6 p.m. and Thursdays from noon to 3 p.m. Our distributions will be held outside and are designed to ensure that no person-to-person contact occurs. Our facility and distribution areas will be sanitized hourly, and volunteers will be provided gloves. We are taking considerable precautions to protect our staff, volunteers, and customers at this time. We have asked that any volunteer over the age of 60 please stay home. This reduces our weekly volunteer force by 70%. We are seeking young community members to step in at this time. To inquire about volunteering, please visit our website at www.northvalleyfoodbank.org to fill out an online application. We are asking any customer who suspects they might be sick to call us. We will make arrangements for outside food pickup or food delivery. To support North Valley Food Bank at this time, please consider making a financial donation via our website. Alternatively, please consider dropping off food and other necessities in our outdoor donation box. We will check the donation box throughout the day. Essential pantry items include peanut butter, tuna, canned soup, soap, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, good luck, and any other items you might typically stock your own pantry with. For questions, please contact Jesse Lee at director@northvalleyfoodbank.org. So, hope you could hear that, Rebecca, and I'll turn to you now for any comments you'd like to add for this evening.
Just that a lot of the stores are also taking call-in orders so that you don't have to go into the store. You can call them, and a staff member will meet you at the curb, so you don't have to go inside and possibly contaminate someone if you're sick or risk it. And this is really serious, so be kind, but be really strict with your distancing, and make sure that that the children are not too busy in town. Sometimes I think we forget that they can be carriers, and they might not actually get the symptoms that they could make other people sick if they're carrying. So we just are in the new stages of the pandemic, so we all need to be very careful.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
Anything further from staff this evening? Angie?
I do. I want to actually just make sure we're all on the same page. When we discussed doing an emergency interim zoning ordinance at the April 6th meeting, while we cannot capture those CUP applications that go before planning board on Thursday, I kind of understood you guys to say that is why we're not going to call a special session. I would let you know that you also won't capture any subdivision applications that come in the next 3 weeks. So if you guys are, willing to have that comfort level, to be honest with you, given how we would notice, you probably would only, if you called a special session as quickly as you could, you probably would only have about another week of capturing subdivision applications. But I just wanted to make you guys aware that there will be a 3-week period that we will still be accepting subdivision applications.
Thoughts?
John, if that's the only item on a special, if that would be the only item on a special meeting, I think we can manage that in short order. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to taking it up within the next week.
Okay. Steve? You're okay with that? Okay. Melissa?
No, I'm okay.
Angie, I think the council's signaling that they would like to try to expedite a special meeting within the next week.
I don't think if we noticed it,
Or whatever the noticing requirements are.
yeah, it would not be within the next week. It would be probably early in the probably the 30th before we could, hold a special meeting with the noticing requirements.
Okay.
So that only saves us a week.
Saves us 1 week.
So it would save you 1 week, yeah.
Worth it?
Do we have any idea? I mean, sometimes we have an idea if projects are coming in.
Dave?
Dave, do we have any idea of projects or if there's anything?
You know, I only know of one that came to site review about a month ago, right next to High Point on Second Street. I don't know when they're gonna submit that. I know they're working on it. I have no idea if it's gonna get submitted in the next month or not, but.
Just given the nature of the situation, saving
the
us
fewer
1 week.
meetings, the better.
Yeah, and saving 1 week.
Yep. I say punt. Fine. You guys okay with that? Okay, we'll just hold it for April 6th. Okay, thanks. Anything further from staff? How about council? Be safe out there. We are adjourned.
Okay.